Many of us only tried one approach and then gave up. But did you know there are other ways to get into picture books? Hello everyone! Welcome to our Business with Ness. I'm Ness and I'm a professional illustrator. Today we're talking about picture book illustration and more specifically, how to get your foot in the door as a picture book illustrator. Lots of good stuff to cover, so please do all the YouTube things. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and let's just jump right into it. Today I'll cover 3 main ways to get your foot in the door as a picture book illustrator. The first way, number 1, is working with authors. You're probably aware of this one. This is what most of us illustrators start with. At the beginning of our career, just looking for some experience, a lot of us are working with authors who are self-publishing a book. And for sure, this is a method that is a lot less intimidating than trying to work with a publisher right off the gate. However, there are some pros and cons to working with authors, so here are some of them. On the pro side, this is a very entry-level job. Authors are usually not quite so picky in terms of quality a lot of times because they don't know what to look for. So even if you don't have the most experience, even if you don't have the most highest quality artwork, or you don't have the super duper professional website with everything lined up exactly as it should be, you still probably can get started with an entry-level gig with a self-published author. And this can be great because, of course, none of us are at the top of our game on the first day on the job. We all need an entry-level opportunity. Another pro is that this can help you gain experience and practice your skills before you're really ready to go in with a publisher. Maybe it's your first book, you've never done one before, you're not sure how it's going to go exactly, you're not sure how those skills are going to come together, so this is great practice. And another pro is that it's a lot less intimidating, it's easier to approach. The client is not a company, it's an individual. A lot of the time they might be their first ever book, maybe they've written something for their kids or their grandkids and they're looking to get it published in self-publishing, and it's sort of a much less formal type of gig. On the other hand, there are many cons to working with self-published authors. First of all, it's really not that well paid. As I said, authors are most of the time individuals and they don't necessarily have thousands and thousands of dollars set aside for their little pet project. A lot of them are willing to spare as little as $500 or $1,000, and really, picture book illustration is worth a lot more. You're going to take from anywhere from 3 to 6 months to draw their books, and so this pay is probably not going to be worth it at all. Another big con is that a lot of times self-published authors actually don't know what they're doing either. So although it's a very entry-level gig, it's not the best way to learn necessarily because they're not going to be able to show you. So when it comes to all the technical requirements like bleeds and margins, what printer to use and how to send the files to the printers, or how to work with their manuscripts, if there are any tweaks that need to be done with the artwork, they're not going to be able to show you how this is usually supposed to go. And in fact, many authors count on the illustrator to tell them how it's supposed to go. The few times I have worked with self-published authors, I was expected to teach them how they are supposed to format their book and what their steps should be. If you don't have that experience, then this is going to be very hard on you. You know, you have an author that doesn't know what they're doing and you have an illustrator that doesn't know what they're doing. So how does the project happen in a smooth way? This can be tricky. And lastly, another con is that it's actually more competitive than you might think. And that's specifically because it's an easy entry-level job. Many people think that it's a lot less intimidating and a lot less difficult to get than work with a publisher, so everyone tries to get that. Because of that, it ends up being very competitive. I have seen so many times people in Facebook groups or on job boards fighting almost to the death to get a gig with the self-published authors. You can see an author posting, saying something like, hey, I'm looking for an illustrator, and they have hundreds of replies, people sending them their portfolio. That is extremely competitive, and so even if you have great work, it might be difficult for you to get a gig, especially if your prices are reasonable. Competition tends to drive prices lower, and so you will have artists fighting for the right to get a gig that's $500, something like that. It can be very, very absurd and ridiculous pretty quickly. So working for self-published authors can really be a mixed bag, but it is a great way to get started. There are many different ways that you can find authors. First of all, as I mentioned, there are picture book illustration Facebook groups, which is a great place to connect with authors. I will link a bunch of these groups down in the description if you want to check them out. There are also job offer forums or job offer boards, such as on DeviantArt, Behance, ArtStation, etc. Then there are also all the freelancing websites like Upwork, Fiverr, Freelancer. I really don't recommend these websites. If you've seen some of my videos, like my videos, should you use Fiverr? I really think that these websites are exploitative, but it is one of the places where authors will be trying to find illustrators. And then, of course, another way, sometimes the authors are the ones that can contact you through social media. And so if you want them to be the ones to reach out to you, something that you can do to appeal to them is create some content for, let's say, your Instagram, in order to catch the attention of authors specifically. On Instagram, this could be education content in Reels, for example, teaching self-published authors how they can publish their book. This type of content is obviously going to attract authors. So things like, where to find an illustrator, how to work with an illustrator, what kind of platforms they can use to publish, like Amazon KDP, Ingram Sparks, or even how to market their books. If you put out this sort of educational content that authors are going to be looking for, then you put yourself in front of them. I've discovered this thanks to this YouTube channel because I put out several picture book illustration videos that were aimed at illustrators, but authors have found those videos too, and I have had a lot of authors reach out to me to work on a book together after seeing me on YouTube, even though that wasn't even the plan. So I really recommend being proactive and putting out that sort of content to get author eyeballs on you and your art if you're looking to work with authors. Now, the second way that you can get started in picture book illustration is to work with publishers directly. And this is the way that I got started myself. At first, like everyone else, I was on the Facebook groups trying to bid on those gigs, and I was never getting any luck because it's very, very competitive. I got frustrated with these gigs, and especially with the low prices, pretty quickly. So I gave that up and I decided I'm just gonna have to go directly to publishers. It is a bit more scary, but I've never been one to back down from a challenge, and so that's what I did. Compared to working with authors, you need to do a little bit more prep work before you're ready to query publishers, but it's certainly not impossible, even for someone who doesn't have any experience. So you need to put together a portfolio website. You need to do some company research to find some companies that you would like to work with. But after you've done that, the good thing is that the contracts with publishers are usually a lot better paid than with authors, which is a big plus. So even though it takes more prep work, because the contracts are better paid, if you get those, you can be able to make a living from picture book illustration quicker than working with authors. So at the end of the day, it kind of balances itself out in terms of the time that it takes. Of course, with absolutely no experience, no books under your belt, if you go straight to a top 5 publisher like Scholastic or Penguin Random House, you're probably not going to be able to get a gig. So I would suggest to start with smaller publishers or local publishers. That's what I ended up starting with. I ended up doing a book with a local publisher. Because it was very small, the pay was pretty low. It was $1,500 for my first book, but it's still a lot more than what authors are willing to pay a lot of the time, so it's not all that bad. Of course, nowadays, I wouldn't suggest accepting a book deal like that. $1,500 is really too low, even with a small publisher, but I didn't know that at the time, and it did end up helping me get my foot in the door, so it all worked out in the end. So here are some of the pros and cons of working with publishers. On the pro side, first of all, they can really show you the ropes. I consider myself extremely lucky that my first book ever was with a publisher because I was able to ask all the questions that I wanted, and they really were able to show me how it's supposed to work. I work with an actual editor, with an actual art director. There was a designer assigned to the book. I was able to talk to all of these people and learn how a real book contract with a real publisher usually goes. They sent me their standard contract that I was able to look over and analyze. This contract helped me put together my own contract template later down the line. I was very straightforward and upfront with the fact that this was my very first book, and they were very generous with their time, helping me with all the questions that I had and making sure that the book was exactly formatted as it was supposed to be. Looking back, I really appreciate this so much. I know that if I had started with an author, I would have struggled because I didn't know what I was doing. The second pro, of course, is a better base pay. Even if you work with a very small imprint or a local publisher, it's probably still going to be more than what an author is able to afford. And then, of course, another pro is that it looks pretty impressive in your portfolio. You're able to say that you are a published illustrator, that you work with a real publisher, and you're able to show off this book in your portfolio. This really helps a lot. I've noticed, certainly for me, my queries before my first book and after my first book, it was night and day, because being able to show that, all the publishers suddenly were interested because they could see that I had that experience. It made all the difference in the world. And then books published with a traditional publishers will end up on bookshelves, even just locally if it's a small publisher, but still people will see it, there will be eyeballs on it. Sometimes with authors, the book doesn't go very, very far. Sometimes they only sell copies to friends and families. But with a publisher, people will see this book. It will be distributed. And so other companies might see it, and this can lead to further work opportunities in the future. On the con side, as I've mentioned, it's a little bit more work up front, because you have to put together your portfolio and do a lot of research before you're ready to contact art directors. For a portfolio, I suggest to start with 12 pieces. So it is still, 12 illustrations that you have to draw for this portfolio, plus putting together the website. It can take a long time. Another con is that publishers have a much higher quality control than authors, because they really know what they're doing. They have art directors, they have people who know exactly what they're looking for. So if you're not showcasing the right skills in your portfolio, or if you have some flaws in your drawings, they will see this immediately, and it can affect, your chances of actually getting a contract. However, I do think these skills are ones that you will have to have later down the line in your career. So taking the time to acquire these skills now, I think, is really, really important. And once you have the publisher stamp of approval, you know that you have passed this higher quality control level. It can take longer to get your first chance. It can take longer to get started. However, once you get started with this method, things can really start to snowball pretty quickly. After I got my first book, which took me about, I want to say 6 or 7 months after I started freelancing full time. But after that, I was never without work again. It worked really well. So the ways to get started with this method, like I said, put together your portfolio website, make it as solid as you need. Then research some companies so that you get some email addresses that can get you started. And then it's important to be persistent. Don't just send one email and then give up. You need to follow up every 1 to 2 months, and then maybe eventually they will have something for you. You can also try to get an illustration agent to represent you and show your work to companies around. This can really help you. However, it's difficult to get an agent. It's even more competitive than trying to get a publisher's attention. So don't put all your eggs in this agent basket. Really send queries by yourself. Very, very important. If you're not too sure how to do any of this, I have courses about this. My Art Business Bootcamp Level 1 and 2 show how to create a portfolio and reach out to companies. So I'm going to leave the links to that in the description if you'd like to check it out. So up until this point, no big surprises. You can work with authors, you can work with publishers, but did you know there is a third way that you can get started with picture book illustration? And so the third method number 3, is to create your own book. Because the problem with method 1 and 2 that we discussed is no matter how good your work is, you have to depend on someone else to give you a chance before you can get started. That very first book is the hardest one to get, and many artists get stuck there. While there are ways to catch an art director's eye, even if you don't have any prior experience, still there is a luck factor attached to that. You have to have the exact art style they're looking for at the moment they're looking for it. On top of that, there's a lot of competition. So what do you do when that happens to you? When you keep trying and trying, but nothing happens? Do you just stay stuck there forever? That's a time when I would suggest to try this third method and work on your own book. Because here's a secret, you don't actually need anyone's permission to be able to create your own book. You don't have to be hired to be able to create a book. You can write and illustrate your own book. You can even publish it yourself. With all the tools available nowadays, it's not that difficult anymore to self-publish your own book, and it doesn't even cost an arm and a leg anymore. You can use print-on-demand services like Amazon KDP, so you don't have to purchase a huge inventory of books that you have to put in your garage. Or if you wish, you can even run a Kickstarter in order to get the funds that you need to print a larger quantity of books. And then you can go around and sell your own books by, for instance, asking your local bookstores to carry them. You can sell in person at conventions and markets. You can contact local schools and bookstores or libraries to organize book signings and book readings. And of course, you can also sell them online. The beauty part is not only it allows you to get started now without waiting on anyone's permission, but it also helps you get the experience that you need creating a book. It's an impressive new project to add to your portfolio that's going to have the same effect as if someone hired you to do a book. I always say there is no better way to show someone that you can do the thing than by doing the thing. When you query publishers and you tell them, okay, I've never done a book before, but I can do it, trust me, it's not nearly as convincing as when you can show them the book that you've done and they can see for themselves the quality in what you're able to create. So a self-published book allows you to gain skills, gain experience, showcase those skills, and it can even lead to future opportunities on top of making a little bit of money selling them now. So right now, if you're thinking, okay, but I'm not an author, how am I going to write the manuscript? Don't worry, I'm going to give you some ideas. There are many types of picture books that you can write, both fiction and non-fiction. You could illustrate a fairy tale or a myth. You could use a story in the public domain. You could illustrate a story or anecdote from your own childhood. If all else fails, you can also use ChatGPT to generate topic ideas to get you started. Do not use ChatGPT to write it though, only to help you get a general idea. Or you could go nonfiction, write an ABC book or accounting book, or you could create a pun book. My best-selling book that I've done personally, it was with a publisher, but it was a pun book just with a bunch of cute puns related to foods. So it wasn't really something that was all that difficult to write, and it was a bestseller. Picture books are extremely short. On average, they contain 200 words for the entire book. So the stories or topics have to be extremely simple. It may be easier to write than you would think. But no matter which method you choose, whether you want to work with authors, with publishers, or create your own book, you are going to need skills in order to tell that story. You're going to have to be able to draw characters and emotions, locations, and all sorts of different things. You're also going to have to excel at composition and coloring. And if you're trying to get work with an author or publisher, you're going to have to display all of those skills in a way that can communicate that you really know what you're doing. This can be tricky, but if you're overwhelmed, I have something that can help with that. Over the years, I gained a lot of experience working with multiple agents and working with publishers like Scholastic and Sourcebooks, for instance. And I've compiled all of that knowledge into a course called the Picture Book Portfolio Prompts 10-Day Course. It's an awesome course that all my students have been raving about. And for 1 week only, I'm giving you a special discount so you can get this course for only $37. And you will be shocked at all that you get inside this course for just $37. I went all out for you with 10 video lessons packed with industry secrets, over 50 video critiques so you can see my tips in action on real student work, and 30 drawing prompts specifically crafted to help you bring out all the skills that I've helped you acquire in the course. I'll help you learn how to make better picture book pages and craft a portfolio that really stands out. You only have until Sunday, August 13th to snatch this course while it's at $37, and then the price goes up. So don't miss this opportunity. I hope to see you there so we can work on your portfolio together. But for right now, that's it for me today. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help our small channel grow. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye!